I am 92 years old, and most people assume my story is already finished. When strangers see my trembling hands and silver hair, they offer polite smiles filled with quiet pity. They think my greatest days are behind me, sealed in dusty photo albums and fading memories. But what they do not understand is this: life does not end when your youth does. In many ways, it begins again. I stand before you not as someone waiting for the end, but as someone who discovered a powerful truth at 60, and it changed everything I believed about time, purpose, and second chances. When I turned 60, I felt invisible. My children were busy building their own lives, my career was winding down, and the world seemed to be racing forward without me. Every advertisement celebrated youth, speed, and innovation. I felt like an outdated version of myself. Friends were talking about retirement as if it were a slow descent into irrelevance. I remember sitting alone in my kitchen one evening, staring at the clock, wondering if the rest of my life would simply be waiting. Waiting for birthdays, waiting for holidays, waiting, eventually, for the end. That fear almost convinced me I was done growing. But something unexpected happened that night. I found an old notebook from my 20s. Inside were dreams I had carefully written down, dreams I had buried under responsibilities and expectations. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to travel across the country by train. I wanted to learn how to paint landscapes. Reading those pages felt like meeting a younger version of myself who still believed in possibility. And instead of feeling regret, I felt something else stirring inside me. It was not sadness, it was not nostalgia, it was a quiet, stubborn spark of curiosity. That spark terrified me more than regret ever had, because regret is comfortable, it gives you excuses, but curiosity demands action. I told myself I was too old to start over, too old to compete, too old to learn new skills. The world belonged to the young, didn't it? Yet deep inside, a voice whispered that time would pass whether I acted or not. 10 years would come and go regardless. The only question was whether I would arrive at 70 wishing I had tried or grateful that I did. So, at 61, I made a decision that shocked everyone around me. I enrolled in a community writing class. I was the oldest student in the room by decades. The instructor was younger than my youngest child. I felt awkward, slow, and out of place. My hands hesitated on the keyboard while others typed with lightning speed. But something remarkable happened during those sessions. Nobody laughed. Nobody pushed me aside. Instead, they listened. They valued my stories because I had lived long enough to gather them. Learning at 60 was different from learning at 20. I no longer cared about impressing anyone. I did not chase grades or approval. I chased meaning. Every lesson felt intentional. Every sentence I wrote carried weight because it was shaped by decades of experience. While younger students imagined heartbreak, I had survived it. While they researched history, I had witnessed parts of it. Age was not a weakness, it was depth. And for the first time in years, I felt useful again. Progress was slow, and doubt visited often. There were mornings when my back ached and my confidence disappeared. I questioned whether I was embarrassing myself. Society quietly suggests that reinvention has an expiration date. We celebrate young entrepreneurs and teenage prodigies. Rarely do we highlight the 60-year-old beginner. But each time I considered quitting, I remembered the notebook from my 20s. I remembered that younger version of me who had believed in more. I refused to betray him again. By 65, I completed my first manuscript. It was imperfect and flawed, but it was mine. I sent it to publishers and received rejection after rejection. Thin envelopes arrived like reminders of my limitations. Friends suggested I accept it as a hobby and move on. But rejection at 60 felt different than rejection at 20. I had survived far worse in life: financial hardship, illness, heartbreak. A few letters could not destroy me. Instead, they strengthened my resolve. At 68, a small, independent publisher took a chance on my book. The print run was modest and the marketing budget nearly non-existent. I did not become famous overnight. There were no red carpets or television interviews. But something extraordinary happened. Letters began arriving from readers, men and women who said my words reflected their own quiet struggles. They thanked me for reminding them that it was not too late to try. In helping myself, I had unknowingly encouraged others. That was the moment I understood a deeper truth. Reinvention is not about fame or money. It is about aliveness. It is about waking up with intention instead of resignation. At 70, I felt more energized than I had at 55. I began speaking at small community centers, sharing my journey with retirees who believed their best chapters were finished. I looked into their eyes and saw the same doubt I once carried, and I told them what I now knew with certainty. Time does not close doors. Fear does. We blame our age when the real barrier is hesitation. At 60, you still have thousands of mornings ahead of you, thousands of chances to begin again. The body may slow, but the mind remains capable of expansion. Growth does not belong exclusively to youth. It belongs to anyone brave enough to pursue it. When I stopped counting the years behind me and started valuing the years ahead, my entire perspective shifted. At 75, I learned how to paint. I stood before a blank canvas feeling exactly the way I had in that writing class years earlier, inexperienced and uncertain. But there was beauty in being a beginner again. Each brushstroke was a declaration that curiosity still lived within me. My paintings were not masterpieces, but they carried emotion. They carried gratitude. And once again, I was reminded that starting late is infinitely better than never starting at all. Now, at 92, people often ask me what my greatest accomplishment is. They expect me to mention the book sales or the speaking engagements, but my proudest achievement is much simpler. I refuse to surrender to the idea that my life had an expiration date on growth. I chose expansion over comfort. I chose uncertainty over stagnation. That choice, made at 61, transformed the next 30 years into some of the most meaningful years I have ever lived. If you are 60 right now, you may feel the quiet pressure of time. You may think opportunities belong to someone younger, faster, more technologically fluent. But let me tell you something important. Experience is power. Wisdom is currency. Patience is a competitive advantage. The world does not only need innovation, it needs perspective. It needs stories forged through decades of living. You possess something that cannot be downloaded or replicated. Once I believed courage belonged to the young. I was wrong. True courage is starting when everyone assumes you are finished. It is raising your hand in a room where you feel out of place. It is daring to imagine that your future can still surprise you. At 60, you are not at the end. You are at a crossroads. One path leads to comfort and routine. The other leads to growth. Only one of those paths will keep your spirit awake. There were moments when loneliness accompanied my journey. Change can distance you from those who prefer familiarity. Some friends drifted away because they could not understand why I refused to slow down. But reinvention often requires solitude. In that quiet space, I rediscovered my own voice. I learned to enjoy my own company. And I realized that fulfillment is an inside job, not something handed to you by others. Health challenges came, as they inevitably do. Surgeries, medications, physical therapy, none of it was easy. Yet having purpose made recovery different. I was not simply healing to survive, I was healing to continue creating. Purpose gives the body a reason to fight. It gives pain context. Even at 80, I set small goals. Finish a chapter, complete a painting, prepare a speech. Goals shrink despair into manageable pieces. Society measures age in numbers, but fulfillment is measured in engagement. A disengaged 40-year-old can feel older than an inspired 80-year-old. The calendar is impartial. It keeps moving forward. What changes is how we move within it. When I embraced the idea that growth had no deadline, I stopped fearing birthdays. Each year became proof that I had more time to contribute, to explore, to love. At 72, I met a woman who decided to learn piano for the first time. By 80, she was playing for her grandchildren. I met a man at 65 who started a small nonprofit to mentor young entrepreneurs. Their stories mirrored mine. We were not exceptions, we were examples of what happens when people refuse to shrink themselves to fit society's expectations. Regret is